The Last Forest by Dylan Newkirk. He lurched through the portal cut in the forest. It was a doorway made of young trees. In the distance, out in the endless field, screeches could be heard. Cattle, of a sort. This was the last forest, the only one they hadn't raped. A secret need had saved it from becoming just another 50-acre plot of farm. A quirk of biology had left it as a reminder of the old world, now lost everywhere else. He'd cut the doorway into the hidden lost world on a whim. It struck him like a thunderbolt. I need to get in there. I have to get out of the gray, the brown, the desolate, wind-swept, post-agricultural hell. He'd known it was wrong to think like that, let alone act on it, but he couldn't help himself any longer. He'd resisted these impulses, these urges, for many long years, and he couldn't take it anymore. The day's work had drunkened him. The fumes of the cramped workhouse, the smoke and particulate matter that swept over the bleak, treeless landscape. The environment itself twisted the mind, made it hard to tell what was real and what was just a self-serving fantasy. Now he was back in the forest. The sweat of sunlit labor was dry upon his back once more, and he was mad with hope. He had to find Oak Man. Wandering along his rough-cut path, the man feared what he would find. He feared it, deep and hot and lustily in his belly, the threat of ecstasy rich upon the fertile air. That threat, the promise of forbidden pleasures and the resurrection of a suppressed truth, it made him feel alive again. He'd been dead ever since the last time, and dead a lifetime before that. He'd never known what the world had denied him, not before he entered that final forest for the first time. Now, he couldn't think of anything else but the elusive joy, the feeling of vibrant hope and freedom that came from finding the heart of the forest. This was the only one, the only forest left in this part of the world. They had hacked down and burnt all the others, plowed over the stumps, and planted an endless field of yellow fruit. The fruit could be beautiful when you looked at it up close, but from afar, it was drowned out by the dull, industrialized color of the stalks, the engineered verdigris of their square leaves. His trail went over hills and crossed the small creek that passed through the forest. As he walked, he would see here and there little birds flitting to and fro, the same species of birds that lived among the corn rows and were killed by the hundreds when they struck the electrified fences meant to keep workers from wandering too far. Here, at least, they seemed free. The man wondered whether these simple animals felt the same need for this place. He wondered if they too felt only half alive when they weren't embraced by these old trees. Every so often, beasts would hear him coming and crash through the underbrush in panicked flight. He caught brief glimpses of them as they fled, deformed, asymmetrical deer, bald, eyeless, turkey-like birds that struggled through the trees, working on sight alone. These things didn't seem right to him, but they were also the only wild animals of this kind that he'd ever seen, and so couldn't say for certain. He thought they couldn't possibly be as they were meant to be, as they were in the old days. The rough metal of his pelvic girdle itched fiercely when his thoughts strayed to what nature intended, what life had been like back when this forest had covered the continent. Moaning up ahead, it was Oak Man. It was release. The young man fingered the battered handle of the long, thin knife he wore at his belt. He knew the price and was prepared to pay it once again. His doubts made him afraid, but his memory of utter abandon, of true happiness, that gave him the strength to push forward and enter the clearing. Oak Man stood alone. None of the lesser trees dared get too close to his earthen throne. This clearing was his alone, and the young man averted his eyes in proud deference as he gingerly stepped over and around the minefield of dead animals. The withered and dying old tree was surrounded by the brittle corpses of forest animals. It had been like this the last time he'd come, but now there were more of them, and somehow the scene felt much more ominous than it had before. He needed the release, though, so he went forward and felt his heart quicken in anticipation of what he craved so deeply and so secretly. Oak Man had deep, probing roots that rose and fell in and out of the dark soil. Those roots were what thirsted. They needed his body to swell like a rain cloud and burst. His eyes rose to behold the ancient tree, this dying forest god, this terrible and beautiful spirit of all days now consigned to a censored past age. As he prepared to feed the dying tree his blood, the pleasure seeker hesitated. His blood trickled on the grass, but fell just short of the tree's exposed roots. He heard it in his mind. The workhouse music called to him. Was he sick for doing this? Was the primal instinct right because it felt good? Was the modern world wrong because it constricted and demanded purpose? He took a step back and felt his heart harden. What could this yield him in the end? Maybe he had to go back before it was too late. But by then, it was already too late. Oak Man is not patient and not kind. He waits for an offering. If it is not given quickly enough, or if it is withdrawn, then the old man of the last forest will swiftly rise to take it. It wasn't always like this. The forest was a kinder place, once upon a time. But Oak Man is starving. He is dying. The forest is choking and starving and screaming silently beyond the range of all human ears. The fluke of natural law that permitted it to survive past its time won't save it forever. The forest is doomed, and with it, all the fields and all the corn and all the men in all the workhouses. The pleasure seeker, the young man from such a workhouse, this last voyager into a dead world, he knows none of this. He is only afraid, only denied, only broken and consumed by needs that he can barely comprehend. As the thirsting forest god rips free of the soil and heaves in morbid fury, the old and careworn blade falls from his hand. His metal parts stop itching. His flesh parts stop desiring. They all fall into an ordered silence that this wind-swept world had denied him up to this point. What makes his mind clear? What makes his body finally stop making cruel demands upon his suffocated spirit? The realization of mortality, that study of death that illuminates all things when it comes to each of us. The threshold of death yawned immense and great and awful and totally inescapable. He is alive, and he is not. It grants him an unchallenged opportunity. The man sees what he could do in that singular moment. He could go back to the workhouse. He could show the others. They could be free again. It wasn't impossible. They could do it. But only if he can get out of the forest. All men could find a balance. They could let go of the gnawing fear and embrace the way they were meant to live. But all that revelation comes to nothing. The union of old and new is aborted before it can take its first free breath. The man can't run from Oak Man. The lesser trees close in around the pleasure seeker. His trampled path disappears and he can't find a way out. He can't do anything but cry out in desperate regret. Regret not for this twisted end to his story, but that it was a temptation for him at all. If the old world hadn't been denied him, denied to all men since before he was born, then it wouldn't have come to this. The extreme holds lure when the organic is refused. Oak Man takes what he deems his. No more man, no more pleasure to seek. All returns to stillness and the fecundity afforded by borrowed time. What's left of the man, his metal parts, they start to dissolve in the acid rain. Their essence leaks into the mud. The mud goes down the big hill, and it finds the flowers the bees need. They don't last long after that. The bees die off, those precious bees that justified leaving the forest alive. The clotted river scales over completely. The deer finally lose their shape and hobble into absolute extinction. The turkeys live, for a while. Without eyes, they live their last days in a blissful innocence. They have no idea that the bulldozers came to take the last forest into memory. No idea at all. Until they hear Oak Man begin to scream.